We are what we think. All that we are arises with our thoughts. With our thoughts, we make the world. Buddha. Please remember that I am not a financial advisor.
We are projecting ourselves 10 years into the future so that we can avoid the headlines of whoever wants to produce something in the next 20 minutes or so, that the IMF wants this.
Yeah.
So we are all putting our little dream binoculars on and looking at the institution in 10 years' time. So 2027. You know, as always, I begin with money. Is the IMF in 2027 significantly, substantially more funded?
Right.
And how is it funded and how does it have access to funding? My sense is that in my institution, our institution, should be stronger financially in 2027 than it is today, because the accident, the financial crisis, the external attack of any sort, maybe cyberspace, who knows? That's to tell how 2027 we are in. Huh?
The International Monetary Fund has three roles: survey all nations' economies, capacity development, and being the lender and buyer of last resort to bail out the world. SDRs are a tool to bail out the world, and they're currently being used. This is a layer of debt, and it is funding the IMF. Lagarde foreshadows a cyber attack. A cyber attack would be a convenient catalyst for a banking reset. Nobody would have to take accountability. The whole system crashes.
The COVID-19 pandemic has shaken our economies and societies to the core and shown us how vulnerable we are to biological threats. In the digital world, similar risks are being overlooked right now. A cyber attack with COVID-like characteristics would spread faster and further than any biological virus. Its reproductive rate would be around 10 times greater than what we've experienced with the coronavirus. To give you an idea, one of the fastest worms in history, the 2003 Slammer sapphire worm, doubled in size approximately every 8.5 seconds, infecting over 75,000 devices in 10 minutes and almost 11 million devices in 24 hours. Fortunately, at least until now, cyber attacks have not impacted our health the way pandemics have, but the economic damages, and therefore the impact they have had on our daily lives, have been equal and sometimes even greater. You see, the only way to stop the exponential propagation of a COVID-like cyber threat is to fully disconnect the millions of vulnerable devices from one another and from the internet. All of this in a matter of days. A single day without the internet would cost our economies more than $50 billion, and that's before considering the economic and societal damages should these devices be linked to essential services such as transport or healthcare. As the digital realm increasingly merges with our physical world, the ripple effects of cyber attacks on our safety just keep on expanding at a faster pace than what we're preparing for. COVID-19 was known as an anticipated risk. So is the digital equivalent. Let's be better prepared for that one. The time is now.
They make their intentions known. They signal each other in plain sight. What would happen if a devastating cybersecurity breach occurred? Emergency regulations would come into play, a set of standards to prevent something like this from happening again. The whole banking sector would need to update their legacy software. They won't have the time, nor would they want to spend the resources to develop compliant software. The compliant software is already available to lease. Ripplenet, Corda, Hyperledger.
Those crises will hit big, because there will be spillover effects, there will be consequences, because I don't think that there is any way to reverse the opening up and the interconnections and the way in which people, young people, people in the trade, people in policies will want to operate together. So the institution will have to be much more substantially funded or have access to rapidly available financing.
The IMF is gearing up to be the central bank of all central banks. And capacity development involves updating nations' banking systems and legal frameworks.
We need to provide a package of resources that your organizations can use to help developing countries, low-income countries, I hope that we'll make progress on approving an SDR allocation, which I think would be a very important way to support the reserve needs globally, especially of low-income countries. You mentioned tackling debt. I think that's an extremely important initiative, concessional finance for the poorest countries. I hope that this will be the focus and the developed countries will band together to make sure that we provide that support.
Ripple started from the bottom up. The small banks, the remittance companies, the SMEs, they have the same tools as the Tier 1 banks are able to offer. They're able to level the playing field. The correspondent banking relationships between large nations and small nations are shutting down. XRP can extend the reach of the SDR to the nations that the IMF, quote, helps.
A massive cybersecurity breach against the U.S. companies, many of them, as well as federal agencies. And there's still so much we don't know, including the full scope of the breach or the extent of the damage it has caused. But we know this much. This attack constitutes a grave risk to our national security. It was carefully planned and carefully orchestrated. It was carried out by using sophisticated cyber tools. The attackers succeeded in catching the federal government off guard and unprepared. Foreign actors have been working this breach since late last year, at least last year, setting the landscape to compromise our systems, scraping up sensitive information from our world-class tech sector and from private businesses and from United States government agencies.
The next economy will be hosted on the World Wide Web. Glenn Hutchins' company Silver Lake bought SolarWinds, the company that was hacked that Biden is speaking about. National walled gardens are being built. The trust between these walled gardens are public ledgers, or crypto assets.
So if I understand what they're doing is they're digitizing their currency. So separate from Bitcoin, it's still fiat currency, right? That is still Chinese money that they are now digitizing. It has huge impacts for their surveillance capacity. They would pitch it as anti-fraud. You can prevent fraud from taking place. I suppose that's true. This is something I think they believe will reduce the costs of cross-border transactions as well for the Chinese. Your point about not wanting to be a reserve currency, I think, is right. I think they'd like it to be among a mix. They want to make sure that when Secretary Pompeo issues the sanctions against the Iranian leadership, that there is a way to purchase Iranian oil that we don't have the capacity to either seize, understand, or impact. And so I do think these digital currencies, separate from Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, are something you'll see more countries go to. The United States has a project where we're working on it too, but we will be slow off the gate. It has lots of implications for us here at home. And my guess is that we will not be the leader in this forefront, where an authoritarian regime like China sees nearly all upside from having the capacity to issue currency or take away currency from people who act in ways that are inconsistent with Xi Jinping thought.
In a world of national walled gardens, the rules are dictated by the governments. A trustless public asset is key. Pompeo speaks about China using a digital yuan to circumvent sanctions. But with a public crypto asset, all transactions are recorded and transparent.
From China's point of view, they want to get, they don't like the U.S. having this reserve currency because it gives us, a lot of leverage over, Iranian oil supply chains and all sorts of things like that. They don't want the renminbi to become a reserve currency because then you have to open your capital account and you have to do all sorts of things that they really don't want to do. I think the euro, you could think of as, was in part a Chinese weapon against the dollar. It didn't, the last decade, it hasn't quite worked out that way, but that was, China would have liked to see two reserve currencies like the euro. And, even though I'm sort of a pro-crypto, pro-Bitcoin maximalist person, I do wonder whether at this point Bitcoin is also, should also be thought in part as a Chinese financial weapon against the U.S., where it threatens fiat money, but it especially threatens the U.S. dollar, and China wants to do things to weaken it. So it's sort of China is long Bitcoin, and perhaps from a geopolitical perspective, the U.S. should be a little bit be asking some tougher questions about exactly how that works. But some internal stable coin in China, that's not a real cryptocurrency. That's just that's just some sort of totalitarian measuring device.
A digital currency will be at the heart of the next-gen financial system. China is long Bitcoin and probably several other cryptos. The XRP escrow is key. The escrow can be gifted to a neutral counterparty like the IMF, or it can be distributed with smart contracts.
But they have massive foreign exchange reserve in China. They have a productive economy. They don't have the huge trade deficits that the United States have. They obviously manufacture a lot of stuff in China. I mean, we're buying lots of stuff from China. So people need Chinese yuan if you want to buy Chinese production. So I think this is a big deal. Now, of course, in the long run, my expectation is that even if the Chinese introduce the digital yuan and allow both the paper version and the digital version to circulate in tandem, I think that the long-term plan will probably be to gradually phase out the paper currency so that everybody is transacting all in digital. And in fact, they're already doing that right now in China anyway, just not with a digital yuan, but they're using, Alipay and all these other ways. I mean, people don't carry cash around. Everybody is paying with everything through apps on their cell phones. And so obviously a digital yuan would just make that more efficient, and it would make it easier for people all around the world to transact in yuan, not just the people living in China.
Pain is certain. Suffering is optional. Buddha. If you have any suggestions on videos, please comment below. Thank you for liking, watching, and subscribing. If you enjoy my work and wish to support my channel, please consider joining my Patreon.